Greetings, ye nines. Hope you're all well and staying alert. I would like to ask you guys a favor. That please, when chatting to your friends, whether you're meeting them in the park, on the phone, or other social media platforms, please encourage them to engage with these online lesson videos. At the moment, you should be considering yourselves to be in year 10 already because the year 11s would have gone by now. And one thing I want to say to you is we might not get to do these units again, energy and ecology. We only have one topic left in energy, which is specific heat capacity, which is a required practical. And we also only have one topic that we will not be able to cover in ecology because that also is a practical topic, which wherein we'll be doing quadrats and transects. And we normally do those in the CAPAC at school. Other than that, every other topic in these two units have been covered. I honestly do hope we will have time to review these topics, but at the moment, no one knows what the future holds. So please don't put us in a difficult position wherein if we have to predict grades for you, like we did for this current year 11s, we don't have anything to use. Please engage with these lessons, do the quizzes, and we need those quiz scores because at some point, if we need to do predicted grades for you, we'll have something to fall back on. Please. So please encourage your friends to take these online lessons seriously. Thank you. Now, before we proceed, as usual, please pause the video, have a go at this first set of questions. Okay, I'll display the answers. Please mark. I hope you had all of them correct. Let's move on. Today we're going to be looking at a bit at food security because all the food we eat, especially for us as humans, whether meat or whether plants, they all come from plants. So we eat the plants directly, like we eat the vegetables, the fruits, and things like that. But also even the meat we eat, the cow, the cattle, or the pig, or whatever it is that you eat, those animals depend on the plants for food. So if there are no flat plants, then it's going to affect the food chain, and there's going to be a big problem. Now, so one thing we want to look at, we want to talk about pollination because we have wind pollination, like you studied when in year 7, and then we have animal pollination or insect pollination. Now, so if the population of pollinating insects or animals go down, it reduces the amount of fruit for us to eat, and it reduces the number of seeds for new crops or plants to grow. So we have to maintain these insects and animals or birds. Some birds do pollination as well. So we have to maintain that. Now, I'm going to read this short script, which is from BBC Bite Size. You can get the actual voice audio recording from BBC Bite Size. It's a beekeeper named Graham Royal. He's giving a little note on the importance of bees to the food chain. There are lots of different types of bees in the UK, but only one species collects honey and stores it. So a lot of people are confused about the difference between honeybees and bumblebees. Bumblebees are big, furry ones that most people see in the garden, but they don't make honey. Bees are very important pollinators, particularly of crops like apples and pears, early flowering fruits. You often hear this report that says if we lost all the bees, the human race would starve, but that's not actually true. What would happen is that we would have a lot less choice in the food that was available to us. So cereals and rice would grow without bees, but the fruits, the apples, the pears, the plums, we wouldn't have without bees. The important role of bees in the environment is pollination, but in fact, the bees aren't deliberately pollinating the plants. They are visiting plants because they want to get food. Bees are totally dependent on flowers for their food, and it just so happens that when they visit flowers, they transfer pollen from one plant to another, causing them to be pollinated. Flowers and plants have evolved to attract insects, and so they have these very bright colored structures that we call flowers. Well, actually, petals. And they are there deliberately to attract insects. It is like the advertising sign saying, "There is food here." Bees are primary consumers of flowers in terms of the output from flowers. Flowers produce nectar and pollen. The nectar that flowers produce is there solely to attract insects. There is no other real purpose for it. So the nectar that flowers produce is there solely to attract insects. There is no other real purpose for it. Okay, you can finish that off. Let's move on. Please pause the video and have a go at this question. Okay, we're moving on. Please pause the video again, look at this question, then we'll mark on the next slide. We mark the question. Right. So for part one, it says, could this affect other population of organisms? Of course. If there's a decrease in the bee population, it will affect the birds and the flowering plants and crop because the bird in the food chain, the birds eat the bees. Now, what is the best explanation for your answer to question one? Is like give a reason for your answers. The birds and the flowering plants and crops all need the bees. Now, part two. Could this cause the human population to decrease? Like we've read from Graham Royal's account from the BBC Bitesize, it will not affect the human population. It's just that we'll have less choice of food. So no, it will not affect human population. But human depends on many crops that are pollinated. Sorry, humans depend on many crops that are pollinated by bees. Okay, we're moving on. Again, here we go. We have some feeding terms, more feeding terms to look at, feeding definitions. I mentioned trophic levels in my last video, but I thought it was wise this time around to put a definition down so you can see it. The stages in a food chain or web are called trophic levels. Now, there are other aspects of food chains that we didn't talk about. We have scavengers, they feed on dead animals. We have specific animals like crows, vultures, and hyenas that do that. We have decomposers. So after an animal has died, or the leaves of trees fall to the ground, or even a tree trunk falls to the ground, bacteria and fungi break down the dead plant and animal matter. So they secrete enzymes into the surface of these dead organisms to break them down and absorb the digested smaller food molecules. So we have decomposers, the bacteria that help decompose organic matter. Now, and biomass is living or recently dead tissue. That is different from fossil fuel. Fossil fuel that happens is the remains of organisms that died millions of years ago and have been chemically changed. But biomass is recent, living or recently dead tissue. Okay, we're moving on. You can, of course, feel free to pause this video, write some of these definitions down because I can tell you they're going to appear in the quiz. Okay, now I want to talk about the pyramid of biomass energy transfer. In the last video, I talked about the pyramid of numbers. To be exact, the difference between the two is that the pyramid of numbers deals with the number of organisms, the population of organisms in each trophic level of the food chain. Now, in this case, biomass deals with the energy transfer, and it's only 10% of the energy is transferred from the previous trophic level to the next. So when you draw, if you asked in an exam to draw a pyramid of biomass, these are 4 key points you need to note about a pyramid of biomass when you're drawing them. The bars have to be equally spaced around the midpoint, the bars touching. The producer must be at the bottom, and the length of each bar is proportional to the amount of biomass available at each trophic level. Now, I want you to note this part. It says only 10% of the biomass is transferred from each trophic level to the next. The remaining 90% is used by the trophic level to complete life's processes. And what are life's processes? Of course, when we eat, we give heat to the surrounding, HEAT, body heat to the surrounding. We also pass some of the food because not all the food is digested. Some is passed out as excrement. So we'll be looking at some of those things. So only 10% of the energy is actually transferred to the next trophic level. Okay, so we want to briefly look at interdependence. We looked at it the last time, but we want to go in depth to see how plants depend on animals and how animals depend on plants. So, of course, interdependence is how all organisms within an ecosystem depend on each other for food, for shelter, for protection in order to survive. So if the population of one organism rises or even decreases, it can affect the entire ecosystem. So, how do plants help animals? I have listed all these points. Of course, they provide food. We've gone on about that. They used to make medicines, especially for us human beings. We need to remember that. Animals use plants for shelter. That's where there is a bird nest over here. We also use the plants. We use the oxygen from the plants. We're going to look at that in depth in the next slide. Plants provide protection for animals hiding. That is interesting. When animals are hunting, sometimes they hide behind bushes. I'm going to show you that shortly. Plants are used to make clothing, paper, and wood products, and plants also provide beauty for the earth. So these are some of the uses of plants to animals. So this is an example of how birds use plants as for shelter. They build their nest there. This is an example of a bee or an insect building like its own hive in the branches or tree leaf, the back of a leaf. This is a fox hiding, or a wolf, sorry, not a fox, it's a wolf hiding in the bushes, of course, trying to hunt a prey. This is a chameleon. The chameleon has camouflaged itself and is hiding amongst the leaves, the brown leaves. But if you look clearly, you can see the head of the chameleon here. And this is the body of the chameleon. This is the leg, and then the tail goes this way. But that's the chameleon camouflaging, hiding in a tree. Again, this is a moth on a tree bark. If you look at it carefully, it's a moth. This is the moth on the tree bark. And finally, we have a tiger hiding in the bushes, the savanna, grassland. So, yep, these are some of the uses of the things animals use plants for, or how plants help animals. Now, let's talk about this important process. Animals use oxygen from plants, the gas exchange, to stay alive. Now, it's a process where we breathe in the oxygen which the plants give out during photosynthesis, because oxygen is one of the waste products of photosynthesis. We breathe the oxygen in, combine it with the food we eat, the glucose we get from the food we eat, it gives carbon dioxide and water plus energy. Now, so that is an important process, respiration. It takes place in our cells, specifically in the mitochondria. Just a quick reminder of all of those little points. So now next we look at how do plants use animals. Plants use animals to help disperse the seeds. Seed dispersal, we did that in year 7. Plants use animals for pollination, or animals like bees pollinate plants. Some birds do pollinate plants as well. We'll look at that. But one of the things I've talked about earlier when we talked about decomposers, animals fertilize the soils, one, by excreting, and also when animals die, they decompose and nutrients in their bodies re-enter the soil. Now, I just want you remind you, take your minds back to the movie The Lion King. Now, in The Lion King, there was that point wherein the king was explaining to Simba and Simba said to the Lion King, he says, Daddy, we eat the antelope. And the dad said, Yes, we eat the antelope. But when we die and nutrients go into the soil, the plants take it up and the antelope eats the plants. So that's the circle of life. So I just want to remind you, if you're looking, go watching that movie again, some of those interesting concepts all relate to your science. Anyway, let's move on. So plants need carbon dioxide from animals. Of course, we've just looked at the chemical process called respiration. We make one of the products that comes out is carbon dioxide. We don't need the carbon dioxide, but the plants need the carbon dioxide. It's a reactant in the process of photosynthesis. And this is the equation of photosynthesis. Now, in this equation, the plant needs both sunlight and chlorophyll as well to help this process go through. Now, I want to say to you, only 1% of the sunlight energy received by plants is used in the process of photosynthesis. 1%. Remember that, I promise you, it's a quiz question. Only 1% of the sunlight energy is used by plants in the process of photosynthesis. Okay, so how do animals help plants? We've already talked about bees. We're now talking about seed dispersal. So I'm just displaying the slide for you to read before we move on. You can pause the video and read through before moving on. Okay, please pause the video and have a go at these questions. Right, I'll give you the answers. Some animals, such as insects, are attracted to brightly colored flowers. They visit the flowers to feed on nectar. While the insects feed on nectar, its body gets covered in pollen. When the insect visits another flower, it transfers the pollen to that flower. Inside the pollen is a male gamete. A male gamete, remember, gamete means the sex cells, either the male gamete or the female gamete. It fertilizes, the male gamete now fertilizes a female gamete in the flower. After fertilization, parts of the flower develop into a fruit. Okay, please pause the video and have a go at this other task. Let's go. Let's fill in the blanks. It says some animals, such as birds, eat fruits. The fruit contains seeds. The seeds can pass through the animal's digestive system unchanged, undamaged. That means the seeds are not digested. Now, seeds in the animal's feces can germinate and grow to make a new plant. This helps to spread the seeds away from the parent plant. This reduces competition for space, light, water, and nutrients. Those are the four things plants compete for. We've done that in a couple of lessons ago. Okay, let's move on. The other thing we would like to talk about in this lesson in relation to interdependence is the predator-prey graph. These, all what is written on the left are key points. You can pause the video, have a read yourself. I'll point out two things about the graph. The key relationship you notice is that the peaks of the graph are not in sync. There is a lag. The prey is always ahead in the peak and the predator peak is later. Another thing I need to point out is there are usually more prey. That's why the peaks of the blue graph, there are usually more prey than predators. If there are more predators than prey, then there will be no prey. So you got to remember there are usually more prey than predators. Okay. Now, here's a question for you to try out. I'll display the answers. Okay, we're moving on. Here is another graph for you to look at and describe. It says look at the predator-prey cycle graph and answer the questions that follow. Okay, I'll display the answers now. Please mark. Now, I want you to note that one of the real things about hedgehogs is that they hibernate in winter. They enter a state of torpor, called torpor. It's a state of physical and mental inactivity, and they are basically lethargic at that point. Just don't, just conserving energy, basically. That's why they do that. Okay, here's another set of questions for you to try out. Please pause the video and have a go at these questions. Okay, the answers. So the diagram showed us a complete food chain. So definitely a phytoplankton is a plant and that plants are producers. Okay, next slide. Please pause and have a go at these. Now you're going to use only these four scientific words at the bottom to find their corresponding meanings here. Not all the words here, or not all these phrases here, sorry, would have a meaning from these four words. Only these four words will match with only four on the right here. So please have a go. Those are your answers. Hope you had them correct. That's the end of the slide. Please, you can proceed to do the quiz questions. Thank you.